Okay, episode 5, Chasing Ghosts.
Yeah.
The Joan Marie Archer case. Still open. It is a cold case, but it's still considered an active investigation. There's not a whole lot we can go into. And now, the story of phone calls, interviews, case files, and Josh and Amanda spilling it all. I'm Amanda Fallon, and this is the Shirley You Can't Be Serious behind the scenes.
Going into this episode, I think we pivoted into more of a level of reverence, right? And I'm not saying that all the topics that we touched with the Shirley story and Eddie's interviews and everything weren't serious or have a specific tone, but because of the delicate nature of the Joan story, we did, even the way that it was produced in an autonomous way, that it was within the series, but it stood alone. Not a lot of the quirky writing style as the other episodes. We stepped away from Shirley just for a little bit, and the way that we put this one together, we wanted it to feel like it was focused all on Joan. And it serves as almost a moment of silence within the series for Joan. It's really subtle that way, but we wanted to have it be that change of pace just so it feels like for so long Joan hasn't been given that. She's always kind of a side note. The investigation turned out the way that it did, so we wanted to make sure we really highlight how she's always on your mind and she always comes up. You can't talk about any of the other parts of this story without her surfacing, but also how we are very conscious that this isn't a asterisk, right? This is a major component from this story that isn't being told because we don't have the parts to tell. And so...
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, we didn't even know if Joan was going to be its own episode because it is an active cold case. It's still an active investigation. And so, all of the files I have aren't public. We can't share a lot of the details from the Joan case. We can only share, what Roger and Keith and Shirley and the news told us. So that was really hard. And I was actually, when we started putting that episode together and we realized we still had enough to make it its own episode, and exactly what you said, to take a moment of silence and pause,
Yeah.
and focus on Joan. That was awesome. That was great. I'm so glad we did that.
Yeah.
And that was without deep diving into any of the facts.
Yeah, I
Really.
think let's talk about this underlying theme of paying respects and how that takes us into this next part of going to Arizona to find her grave and go talk to her.
We flew out to Arizona in February and interviewed Dan Skaggs.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, we flew back out in April to interview Eddie.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any time to really focus on the Archer case. So when we flew back out in September to meet with Patty Wells, I wanted to show you, I was like, I'm going to take you to the mission, San Javier mission. I want to show you where Joan lived. I want to drive you that exact path that she rode her bike. I want to take you to the area where her body was found.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show you all of that. And I think it was it at the end of all of that tour, we'll call it the Joan Archer tour. I was like, she's buried here off Oracle Road. She's at the Catholic Cemetery in Tucson off of Oracle. And we had my dad with us and we're like, should we go? And I just remember it being so hot. It was a really hot day in Arizona, probably high 90s, 100. And so we went to the cemetery and we followed the coordinates that were posted on the cemetery's website. And we couldn't find her grave.
Well, we couldn't find it on Find My Grave, and then someone posted a photo of where it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And we followed his directions.
And that was inaccurate.
So you took a row, my dad took a row, I took a row, and we spent an hour in the hot sun going down these
It was a
rows in the
few
cemetery.
hours.
Yeah. Looking at all the gravestones. 'Cause I'm like, well, maybe it's just we're off by a row or a section.
Yeah. I think that story is interesting to just think about, right? How a small clerical error made it to where we couldn't find her. When you think about clerical errors that were made that have made it where her case hasn't been solved.
And it must have been a Sunday because the office
Everything
wasn't
was
open.
closed,
Everything
yeah.
was closed. So we couldn't go ask, an office worker or an attendee
And so we
to
gave
help us.
we gave your dad the homework that when we flew out the next morning he had to go. That was his mission, and he did. And he
He did.
found
He
her.
drove back out to the grave, and he spoke to them. But, for a minute there, for 24 hours, I even sent a text to Roger, which I probably shouldn't have done. When I texted Roger,
Did you let him know we found her?
yes, the next day I did. I said, my dad's going down tomorrow to ask the office where she's at. And I feel so bad. I probably freaked out Roger. But, right, it goes back to the injustice with her case. And, for a moment there, you and I went, oh my gosh, did they dig her up? Did they move her?
Yeah.
Yeah, our minds went wild there for about 24 hours. And we were like, I think I texted Roger to ask him the last time he was out to visit her grave. And I think I asked him, was she moved?
Yeah.
And I think you might have mentioned, you're like, maybe the family didn't pay the final bill. We were going on all these crazy theories.
Yeah. No, it was unsettling, but I think it's unsettling because we already have so much uncertainty with everything that has to do with her that it felt like real insult to injury, right? That something else could have happened. Or did it lead to something more nefarious?
But my dad did go the next day. And, well, remember, my dad sent me a text and he said, she's not in the system.
Oh.
When they pulled her name up. And then I sent my dad a screenshot of her find a grave index number, and he gave that to them, and then they were able to pull her up. And then they walked him right to her grave. He said we were in the completely the wrong section of the cemetery. Next time we are in Arizona, though, we will go find her,
See her
and visit her.
That was a really discouraging trip too. I remember because we were supposed to meet with Eddie, and he was sick.
He had remember? It must have
Yeah.
been COVID or the flu. He sounded so bad.
And there were a few setbacks that we had, but just going along this theme of answers for Joan and justice for Joan and what we could do to just trying to bring positive light to her story and her case. And again, feeling this accountability at this point to Roger and Keith and anybody else that is a bridge to the Joan memory.
I'm glad as you research Joan, you've come to know that she was very special, and it is kind of getting a little bit more painful. It's not going away. It's getting a little more painful as people who cared about her and knew her and the bridge to her memory, like those people are passing away right now, whether it's my mom or my mom's dad or whomever.
Let's talk about St. Louis.
Yeah, so then shortly after that, we had a big win. Looking back to when I first started this story, this project, Dan was on my call to-do list. Like, it was Dan, Leslie, Skaggs.
Yeah.
And I wanted to call the kids first. Well, I still had a ton of fear around Skaggs himself.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of test out who Skaggs was through his kids before I called him. And we did. We reached Dan. We reached Dan. And we had a great conversation on the phone, but it alluded to the fact that he didn't really have a relationship with his dad. So he didn't really have a lot of insight there. But we also got the impression he did not want to be interviewed or have any part of this project.
Yeah.
So then we talked to Danny, and I remember the text I got from Dan. It was, I didn't know this is what you guys were doing.
Well, let's back up though. That's what I wanted to talk about. Let's back up. Let's talk about how your initial contact with Dan was a very benign, hey, by the way, you don't really know me, but we're connected, right? We both had Shirley as a stepmom. So you guys had kind of this nostalgic phone call where you call him and you're like, hey, it was very on the surface, but very friendly, right? And he was really sweet to you. He kind of updated you a little bit. Oh, my dad, I live in the Midwest. And so fast forward to you texting him and Leslie once we had met with his dad and said, hey, we're doing a podcast. We want you guys to be a part of it. And then we had crickets.
That's right.
And so then we're like, okay, that's a little bit of uncertainty there attached to that. Like, oh, okay. Now you went from being this friendly, right? Let's catch up because we have these connections. So we started feeling a little bit of a push to, okay, now that 7 episodes are out, let's start sending them to key people that may or may not have heard them already, which is also kind of a fun game to play when we're looking at the analytics because we're like, oh, 9 countries, 43 states. Who is this in Arizona? Who is this in... So it was kind of fun. Oh, this is in Pennsylvania. It's got to be Roger. Oh, this is in Virginia. So then we said, okay, we need to share this with Skaggs, Dan, Leslie, possibly Anne. And sure, we need to get on Eddie's case because he hasn't listened to a single episode. And
I don't know if he ever will, actually, at this point.
It's fine. So you sent episode 7 to Dan. I think you sent it to Leslie,
yeah,
too.
to both of them.
And so you send the episode to them because at this time you still didn't know. Are they close with Skaggs? Do we want them to know the style of reporting that we're doing? Do we want them... All of these thoughts went through my mind. Like, do we want them to know that we're somewhat trying to be impartial and just stating facts? Like, we don't want this to be a witch hunt or romanticizing or glamorizing of certain things. We want this to be just a very linear and factual story based on your stepmom, which is what we set out to do from the beginning. And that's when Dan sent you that text. And do you have the text right there?
Yeah, let me pull it up. I still have him in my phone as Danny.
I think you should leave it.
Okay, so on Sunday, October 5th, I sent Dan episode 7, Till the Moss Turns Pink. I was like, just thought I'd share episode 7 with you. When we sat down with your dad in Arizona, he shares some sweet memories. Dan responds, that was really good. I had no idea that was what you were actually doing. That was really good. Are you still doing this project? And then me, yes, exclamation mark. And would love to record with you and get some more of your thoughts for future episodes if you're into it. Absolutely. I could probably fill in a lot of gaps during that time period. And then we just go on, right? He starts sharing photos and he says, I think my sister would be open to meeting with you guys. So that was October 5th. I think we chatted back and forth for a few days. And then you and I had flights booked by Friday for the weekend after Halloween. And I just, again, there was a sense of urgency that we just had to get out there. Like, I've wanted to meet him for years.
What do you think was going through his mind where it's just a handful of texts going back and forth. And then suddenly you're like, we can fly out this weekend.
Yeah. And he's like, well, we've got some stuff. We've got commitments and schedules. But I did ask him, what date works for you? What weekend works for you guys? And he actually recommended the weekend we ended up going out there. But even when we met him in person, he's like, whoa, I didn't think you guys were actually going to you were really fast. You really booked those tickets.
So let's talk a little bit about the details of all of that, because I think it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with Joan Archer. This isn't a very straightforward thing. Even walking into Dan's house, for all of us, not just him, but us and his wife, right? We all, I think, in the back of our minds had questions and had curiosity. And again, when you think about what compelled Skaggs to go meet with us, what are the thoughts? What are the curiosities? When we talk to Roger or anybody that we talk to, what are the things that we are letting fall into an expectation?
Well, and we should add too, these are not people who would normally want to talk about their story.
Yeah.
Dan even mentioned, nothing good ever comes from stuff you dig up from the past. I think all of them met with us and saw me not as a threat because of who I was in Shirley's life. And because we all shared Shirley as a person at some point in our lives. So, and even Dan flat out told us.
Yeah. Well, and he did talk about how some of the law enforcement people have contacted him, and he felt that it was it was very cold. It was very insensitive. So it is great that you have that leverage and that connection with them.
St. Louis, Missouri, November 8th, 2025.
Amanda, at the beginning on the phone, said, hey, these are all the things that I know, and these are all, right? I know everything. And will you meet up with me? Look, that was really jarring for you. Can you imagine how that was for him? And why do you think he met up with us? What do you think was the pull for him?
The Shirley connection.
Yeah.
If you had been just anybody, off the street, I don't think he would have wasted his time with it. But because you were Shirley's stepdaughter, I think that's probably what it was. He wanted to feel that connection. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, why else?
Yeah, that's interesting to think about.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm meeting up with you. If you just call me randomly, Tucson or Utah, wherever, I would have been like, we could talk on the phone. What do you want to know?
Yeah.
But as far as meeting people, I don't usually do that. But then, but you were Shirley's. We have a common link there.
And I guess the thing that I was trying to get a little deeper, a little more philosophical, is the whole idea of connection through resolve, and also healing through just the talking. I thought, for me, one of the deepest moments sitting with Dan is, and I even expressed to him while he's talking, I said, it gave me chills to hear you say some of the things that you're saying. I didn't realize, maybe I took some things for granted of what I thought he was going to say.
Or of what I thought he knew.
Yeah.
Like, that was also a shock that he, like, what we have in episode 1 of the podcast, he told us he hadn't heard the majority of what we covered. He didn't know what actually happened on the mountain that day. He didn't know what happened to the 2 victims. He knew there was 2 victims and he knew about Archer, but he didn't really know the stories behind any of it.
And there was that level of curiosity where he wanted all the details, the most morbid details, just right. Like, for him, having this knowledge is his attempt at the closure of it and his attempt at the reconciliation of it. When I say that none of us knew what we were walking into, I can really see how his wife was a little dubious and cautious, because she didn't, she's seen him deal with this his whole life, and she knows how it affects him emotionally. She didn't really understand our motivations or perhaps agendas. I didn't know if we were going to go in and he was going to say, hey, why are you guys coming after my dad? Or you guys need to leave us alone. You know what I mean? Like, why are you attacking my family?
Well, when they both went silent, Dan and Leslie, it was shortly after we had released, and I assumed they didn't I assumed that they thought we were attacking their father.
Yeah. What I think, and I was prepared for any scenario. I think our commitment to this story has really obligated us to ask the hard questions and have the potentially awkward interactions. So I was ready for anything when we sat down with him. And what I think became really magical was how we were able to get all of his truths revealed. And I felt a great deal of trust. By the time we left, I think he was also able to know that we were there in the spirit of transparency and genuinely seeking truth. And
Which is all Dan and Leslie want.
Yeah.
And that was really, I think, the most shocking thing from sitting down with Dan that day was hearing him say that him and Leslie are still seeking the truth, and that when they've asked him, he won't answer them. She was young.
Yeah. I remember her asking me questions about what happened. You know, and at that time it was still really raw. So I didn't really want to talk about it. I had a hard time going back to school. There was a big sense of betrayal, you know, when all that happened. So I did tell her some stuff. I don't remember exactly how I approached it, you know, but I think that she got filled in from my mom. So she had a lot of unanswered questions that she never got answers for. And then, you know, when she met my dad a few years back, when he came out, she broke.
Was that visit the first time you guys had seen your dad?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So she broke, yelling at him about, I wasn't part of that, but I heard about it. I was really angry at her for inviting him out. I wasn't ready to do that yet. And then she could only handle him for a couple days, and then I took him to the airport. You know, it just felt weird to me. You know, and with Leslie, she did not get the answers she wanted from him. She yelled at him for not answering her questions because he did not want to talk about it. And basically he said to her, go ahead and get it out of your system, by yelling at him. Didn't faze him at all. So that's where she's at to this day. Because she even said in the text that she sent to me, she's like, you know, he keeps avoiding giving me answers for anything, you know. So
do you think there might be a moment where he will give her the answers that she wants?
He will take anything and everything to the grave. I think we're well beyond the truth, unfortunately.
When Amanda first reached out to him and he asked her, do you know about my ups and downs? And she said, I know everything. And she says, I'm not going to lie to you. I know everything. And he says, no reason to lie. And so it was really interesting where when we went to meet with him, that's kind of that's what we wanted to bring and say, hey, this is just a very honest conversation where we're just going to talk about some things. And I think even sitting down with you, like we didn't come prepared with anything. I think Amanda just wants to talk to you.
Has Leslie listened?
And I said, hey, when you get a chance, this is about Dad and Shirley and all this. And that's when I kind of led into the conversation that we were going to get together and have a conversation, you know. So she knows, you know, but I don't know if she's listened to all of it.
Yeah.
I don't.
We're in contact with Joan Archer's family, right? What's left of them. And so for me, as a cutting and editing, right, this episode with your dad, I had to be very delicate because what you just said is so powerful. How if we all want answers, can you imagine how Roger feels, right? But I think what kind of even gave me chills to hear you say is there's two themes. There's the closure and there's the truth. And that's what we all want. I think that's what for you would be the biggest gift. And that's kind of, I was prying a little bit when I was like, what do you think you were searching for? There's something very, how do I say it? It's, I mean, even coming here to meet with you, there's something very heavy about topics that we all talk about. And I think the only thing that has really carried us through this is we genuinely want truth. Mm-hmm. We genuinely want, And I say this in episode 5 or 6 when I say, hey, look, there's possibly some truth here that could even set your dad free. Did the cops just say, hey, this is a slam dunk, we found this the same day, they look similar, we're going to call it a day and pin it on this guy? There would be a real sense of decades-long injustice to Stephen Skaggs if that's what really happened, right? Now, I feel like, though, again, we circle back to in talking, in sharing, in researching, the answers will be there, I think.
Well, there's no denying he did it, what he did. He did what he did. Now, whether or not there was other ones, that's the part that haunts me, because I was around him at that time, whether it be Alaska or in Tucson. And I can remember all kinds of different time frames that he could have done that. He was gone all the time. I still remember that day. It's like a visual print in my head, I remember exactly what I was doing. I remember I was out cleaning our pool, and I remember him coming out saying, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, cleaning the pool, in my asshole 16-year-old voice, and he's like, well, hey, I'm going up in the mountains to take some pictures. That's what he said. I didn't think anything of it. Bye. He went and got in his truck and he left. And day went, night went. I remember being in bed and the phone rang. It was real late at night. And back then we didn't have cell phones. It was corded phones. And I had a phone in my room and Shirley had a phone in her room, and we both picked up at the same time. I heard it was my dad on the other end, so I just stayed on. And I listened to it all. Right? And, I heard it all, about what he was saying at the time. He was saying, they're trying to pin this on me, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, I didn't think anything of it. And the next morning, Shirley, she woke me up. She said, hey, can you run up to the gas station and get a copy of the newspaper? I'm like, yeah. It was front page. Front page. And the scary thing about that time frame was there was another rapist going on at the time called the Primetime Rapist. I don't know if you've done anything with that one. So that was going on. So that's my initial thought was, my dad's a Primetime Rapist. I thought that's what he was. And then I found out later on it was two different things. But so yeah, it was crazy. What did I do? I go over to my friend's house. I'm like, guess what?
Oh my God.
I was like, get a load of this shit. I showed it to him, and I showed her parents. I'm like, my dad did this. And it was all over the news because I don't know if there's any old news footage of it or anything, but how they pull them out of the back of the car or the truck or whatever it is that they're in, and they've got the jacket over their head, and you can see them walking in with their hands in front of them. They were escorting him into the jail from the police car, and that was all over the news.
KVOA Television 4 Tucson. Eyewitness News at 10. A complete report with Bob Richardson and Patty Weiss. Michael Goodrich with the weather, Ron Brooks on sports, and the Eyewitness News team.
An Air Force Master Sergeant accused of attacking 2 women on Mount Lemmon in July is being investigated in the stabbing death of Joan Marie Archer. Court records say Stephen Elvis Skaggs, 38, is in custody at the Pima County Jail on charges of attempted murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping in the mountain attack. It occurred the afternoon of July 22nd, the same day that sheriff's officials announced the discovery of Archer's remains near West San Javier and South Mission roads. Archer, 25, a dog obedience trainer, had disappeared April 27th, apparently while riding her bicycle along a regular route near Mission San Javier del Bac on Tucson's southwest side. A sheriff's detective said the Mount Lemmon attack occurred after Skaggs blocked the women's car with his truck in a parking lot at Bear Wallow, a picnic site at 8,050 feet. After following the women up a trail, Skaggs allegedly drew a gun and handcuffed one of them to a tree. He allegedly raped the other woman, then bound her hands with rope, fired a shot that grazed her head, and stabbed her 4 times. Skaggs, who is being held in lieu of a $500,000 bond, was arrested as he drove back toward Tucson on the mountainous Catalina Highway. A search warrant affidavit filed in Pima County Superior Court lists several strong similarities between the 2 cases, including the July 22nd coincidence. Sheriff's Detective Jerry Gruskowski gave particular attention to the types of wounds inflicted on Archer and the woman Skaggs is accused of stabbing. Both sustained similar horizontal wounds on the back and neck between vertebrae or ribs. Sheriff Sergeant Doug Whitty, head of the homicide unit, declined yesterday to discuss in detail the investigation of Skaggs and Archer's death. He said Skaggs remains a suspect. Gruskowski said investigators were awaiting results on several lines of inquiry. She wouldn't say whether those were lab results or other investigatory methods. Until we do have them, we can't really say he is a prime suspect, she said. The affidavit noted other similarities between Archer's death and the Mount Lemmon assault.
So I'm like, this is wild, and I remember that whole day I was up in, do you remember Sabino Canyon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were up in Sabino Canyon all day doing cliff diving with me and my friends, and we were talking about it like it was nothing. Like, my dad's in jail. I was like, he got pinned on this thing. I was like, of course, all my friends are like, there's no way your dad's super cool, and so, that went on for a while, and then we started getting the death threats, the phone calls. That was pretty trippy.
Can you imagine? I don't know if that's relatable in any way for most people, right? I think about my parents, who are 2 humans that in your life would give their lives for you, right? That love you unconditionally, and feeling that those people aren't giving you a truth you feel that you deserve from them. Like that's got to be the hardest thing to exist with. I think mentally preparing for that trip, for me, there's a lot of noise going on in life, but just trying to mentally be in a space where we were able to objectively talk with Dan and say, we come just bearing information and hopefully bringing you answers.
And he did ask a lot of questions, just like Roger and Keith and everybody we've interviewed and interacted with as part of the story. He had a lot of questions.
Yeah. And it was a lot. It was such a heavy day because, it's like when someone discovers a really hard truth, but it's a necessary truth, right? It's when you uncover infidelity. Well, you have to know. It doesn't mean that it's easy. And so I think it felt really nice that Dan and his family brought us into his home. His dogs were the most loving giants and slobbered all over me. Having dinner with them, having this, again, very human interaction, again, which mirrored what we did with his dad, where we sat down and we said, hey, let's talk about stories. Let's talk about Shirley. Let's talk about everything surrounding Shirley. Let's share a meal. Let's be humans sharing experiences.
Yeah, I remember Shirley's interview with her when she was telling me how her visits, when she was going to the prison to visit Skaggs during those years, and she had asked him.
But when I asked him a little bit later about it, if there were any others, I wasn't comfortable with his answer. I felt he was lying. I really felt that wasn't the only one. And the more I thought about that started bothering me. And then 7 years, into me going back and forth visiting, he told me he was coming up for parole. And there's a possibility he might be getting out. And that terrified me.
And in the interview, she says, I didn't like his answer. And now after sitting down with Dan, I don't think she got an answer. And I think because he won't answer the question, yes or no. So it kind of takes you even back further, like to Shirley's life again, where you have that understanding when Shirley's telling this interview. It's like Dan, Leslie, and Shirley all share that same, they've all asked Stephen Skaggs.
Yeah. And it leaves us in this precarious moment of we keep running into people that are entitled to answers that aren't getting them, right? And so that's, I think, the parallel that I felt the whole time we sat with Dan and he was speaking to us. I kept thinking of Roger, because so many things that he was saying to us were things that you felt, well, he expressed he had a desire to say to Roger. So I think that continues to be such a powerful theme.
As we got into the internet age, the information was a lot more available than it was when I was in the Army. I mean, I couldn't find out nothing when I was in service, and there was nobody to talk to about it. So I wasn't talking to Shirley. She'd moved on with her life. And then I started reading more stories on the internet about it, because I've always wanted answers. I always wanted to know why, I never once thought he did it more than once. It never even creeped into my brain that I just always thought it was a one-off thing that just happened, And that's how I was until, I don't know, probably about 20 years ago, I guess. I started thinking about it once I started reading about, like, Joan Archer and all that. And even my daughter, who lives in Phoenix, she doesn't know him, but she lives in Phoenix. And she read about it. She's like a little investigator. Well, she's got a degree in criminology and forensic anthropology, something like that. Yeah. That's what her degree's in. So she starts digging. And she called me up one day and she goes, he's done it multiple times. I'm dead serious. That's my own daughter telling me this, off of what she's pulled off the internet. If she saw all this stuff and read all this stuff, she'd flip out. But that, when she was talking to me about that, and it just got me thinking and looking more and more and more. And then you popped up out of the blue and started talking about all this other stuff, and now it's like information overload, It's a lot.
How old's your daughter?
She just turned 32.
Isn't that interesting? So there's another, I don't know if you heard, there's another guy.
I have an older son, too, who's 35.
And where does he live?
He lives in, I think, South Carolina. One of the Carolinas. We don't talk very much.
No, so in the Mount Lemmon case, there's a guy named Jamie who he said, this has affected me deeply. He was the 10-year-old boy whose family found one of the girls. And then he said the same thing. My daughter now is a forensic. He says that. It brought me to another thought hearing you talk about this. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen? And I guess this is me trying to find the positive, is what do you think are some of the positives that are coming from this story?
I thought about that. I was like, which story?
And look, and I'm representing the Shirley story.
I know
right?
you are. And that's why I want to try to keep this. I want to do you guys justice, but at the same time, I'm digging for information too.
Oh, I be completely honest.
So the part that gets to me the most about this whole thing and the suspicion about doing things that it was, Joan Archer's been dead how long?
Since 1986.
And nobody knows who did it.
Her body was found the day before Mount Lemmon.
Yeah. That's the thing that bothers me the most, is if I was a parent not knowing who did this, knowing that there's somebody out there that does know, it would bug me. So, and I've even told Kim this, is that, because she'll ask me, she goes, well, what's the point of you even knowing? And from a third-party perspective, that's true. I mean, something that happened 30, 40 years ago. But if I knew that my dad did this, and I could bring some peace to somebody knowing that, hey, they were right, the cops were right the whole time, I would feel better knowing that. I guess that's the good in it that I can see. Nothing good comes from dragging all this stuff back up again. Really, it doesn't. But has there been justice served for what he did to those two girls? In the state's eyes, yes. Okay. They would probably argue. But if there was other people involved at some other junction of time from the same person, justice has never been served on those, and it probably never will be. But if he were to die, my father were to die tomorrow, and I knew the truth, I would tell him. I would tell him. And I would feel a lot better about the whole thing. But I don't think that truth will ever come out. Even if it is a truth, nobody knows, But I'm one of these types of people that believes where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's too many things that point that direction. And if there was evidence out there at one point that got botched up because of a technicality, it doesn't make you innocent. That it existed and they didn't do it right, it still doesn't make you innocent.
I think I'm still holding out hope that your dad will want to talk to us again and maybe share his story further. He made a comment to us that I just cannot get out of my head, and he said, I think it's really cool what you guys are doing for Shirley because she's dead. So that's like the ultimate love, and this is your dad telling us this, that you could give to somebody is to tell their story after they're gone. And so there is a part of me that's, he'll call us one day, he'll share it.
I don't think it will.
I know. I'm going to hold out hope, Danny.
And I have been, and I have been on the fence for a while now about just point blank asking him.
It was really sad, too. I felt really sad for Dan during that part of our interview with him, because here's this. Dan was in high school when his dad was arrested. He was junior in high school, sophomore, junior in high school. What is that, 15, 16 years old? And he remembers vividly that morning that his dad, he was outside cleaning the pool, and his dad went outside and said, hey, I'm going up to Mount Lemmon. And he carries, did you get the sense that he carries
like a guilt? Yeah.
But he was an innocent teenager. So when he did talk about Roger in the Archer case, and that whole, him and Leslie has asked him, it's almost like because his dad's not answering the question, he's taking on the guilt.
Yeah. And that's what I was getting at, is he expresses, man, it was almost like, even if not for us, but families, right? Anybody else that is owed the same answer that we're dying to have.
I think he tried to apologize to me in the jail, right before I left when I saw him. But, I don't think he wants to acknowledge that he did those things or anything else for that matter. I don't know if he did anything else, but I feel that he did. I don't have anything to prove that, though. And that's kind of, you can ask her, that's kind of where I've been for a little while now. It's just something in me that just says those things happened. How many? I don't know. I don't know if it ever happened, but I don't know how many, but I'm sure it did in some context, which sucks. Because, like we talked in the beginning about bringing closure for those families, I don't think that's ever going to happen. How many people are alive from Joan Archer's side?
We only spoke to 2.
Her aunt.
And the guy that she was engaged to, right?
The guy that she was engaged to, and then her nephew, who was 13 at the time.
So like her family, like her parents are all gone?
Parents are gone.
Yeah.
The other aunts are gone, yeah.
So, running out of people to have closure for, I guess.
And so that was very piercing. Also, though, sitting with us and being able to maintain the composure to meet with us and hear everything we were saying, and at the same time processing everything that he was hearing and understanding. And you can almost hear him like deconstructing these notions that he's had since he was this teenage kid, but also being able to show us gratitude for it, right? I think when all of those little, and we all were doing it, we were all putting down our guard one at a time. Like, does this dude think we're here to attack him? Are we going to do something wrong here? Are we going to say something hurtful? Are we going to say something that is insensitive? And all of us, I think, once we demonstrated to the other party that we weren't there with that intent, we were able to have a really open and really edifying experience.
Well, and it's another reminder, too. This was 1986, 40 years ago. He still has the same answers or the same questions and feelings. Like, he's had no closure either for 40 years. And it doesn't sound like he talks about it.
And I think it was, it was sobering spending time with him, but also very enlightening and very, again, just like all these other stories, it was a positive human interaction that came from a story full of pain.
I think this one's kind of lighthearted. And I actually got this on the phone call with Dan. But, I spent 23 years listening to Shirley's stories and her expressing, you could tell that Dan meant a lot to her. She loved Dan. She had all these great stories with Dan, and she even mentions him in her journal. And then when I got Dan on the phone and I'm like, yeah, what do you remember about Shirley? Like, do you have any great memories you can share? And immediately it was, I don't remember a whole lot. Yeah.
Well, I think that was also speaks to his sincerity, right? He recognized what this means to you. And he very honestly admit to us, he's like, we clashed.
Yeah. So that was just shocking because, and maybe this supports our theories with Shirley where she kind of downplayed everything. Mm-hmm. Like, and this was I feel like this is another example. Or maybe she was aloof and didn't realize that Dan.
Yeah. But I think there was a lot of grace coming from Dan. I think that's what was really impressive to me is to hear, I don't think he's seeking to even his dad, judge his dad or attack his dad. I don't think there's a lot of resolve in Dan, which I liked. Talking to him, he's very wise, he's very calm. And I think there's moments in your life where you forgive people where an apology is never going to come. In his case, I think he's already at the moment where he's trying to make peace with his lack of answers. Well,
it's almost like he's come to terms with he's never going to get an answer, as bad as he wants one. And I think it's shifted from him wanting answers to, this is where the Archer case comes into play, and it's more like he just wants her family to have closure. Like, I don't even think Dan could care less. He's at a point where he's come to terms with his relationship with his dad. They attempted a few trips together, a few visits after he got out of prison. Dan tried to make something work. What would you call their relationship? He mentioned like they just kind of text each other once in a while, like happy birthday or Merry Christmas. It's not a father-son.
It's very surface, but it's really sad because, and I'm going to be a little bit abstract, but think about both of them. Skaggs probably can't fully reach to his children because he's got these things he can't share. And Dan, they can't continue to bond because they have this series of barriers that don't allow full transparency and honesty and genuine connection. So,
well, and would you say that Skaggs, because their most recent visit they had was Skaggs came out to visit them in their home state, and they went, where did they go? The Ozarks?
They went fishing.
They went on a fishing trip. And so that's very much the relationship they had when Dan was a child. He took him on hunting trips and fishing trips. So It's almost as if the best way I can relate it to is, so I lost my mom when I was 27 years old. And when I think of her or my life with her in it, there's two separate calendars. There's everything that like all the milestones I hit and everything I did with her in my life. And then there's all the holidays and milestones and stuff after she's been, after she passed away. So you almost have two different relationships going on. And I wonder if Skaggs is trying to go back to pre-crime, pre-jail,
Yeah.
He's trying to have that relationship with Dan and Leslie when they were kids, and it's frustrating them because that's not the same. They can't have that relationship.
Yeah,
Right now.
there's a little bit
until
of escapism.
he addresses it. Yeah, he has to address
Sure.
those questions that they want
Well,
answers to.
And you look at both sides, is everybody sees that elephant in the room and they know, oh, it's not possible.
Yeah. Do you feel like it frustrated Dan? Like when because he told us, after listening to episode 7 and Skaggs shared all these stories, do you think in a way it left Dan more frustrated?
Yeah, but I think that's what shows the real humanity of Dan. And that's what I was kind of getting at, is there is something very selfless about him saying, I can't have these answers for me for whatever reason. I just wish these people had them. And he did. So there's a few sweet details to this. Kim, his wife, got that trip for him for his birthday to connect with his dad, because she felt there is a void there and she wants to see him happy and she wants to see him progress in this avenue. So with that in mind, he has all of these things in his mind that he wants to address when his dad comes out. Well, his dad comes out and he's weak and he had just had a heart attack.
Was it the same heart attack story he had shared with us? Do you think it was right after?
Yeah. And so Dan tells us, hey, I had all of these moments I had kind of planned out in my mind, but I felt that they weren't. So it shows him being able to perceive, I'm not going to ambush my dad right now in this moment where it's not a fair fight. Like it's not. And then he also talks about, I don't know, there's.
Oh, that's what it was. He was shocked to hear episode 7 because his dad had come out to visit and he didn't sound like that. He didn't remember things the way he was remembering them in episode 7. I think Dan even said, I was surprised that he could recount all of those stories. So I think Dan, that trip happened and he came to terms with never getting answers, because he says his sister will never come to terms with that. He somehow made peace with it. And then, surprise, we throw in this story in this project and, send him the interview with his father. And I think that opened up the floodgates again, because he realized, wait, my dad does remember stories. He isn't that weak, feeble man that came out and visited me.
Yeah. Where do you think Dan goes from here?
I think the best outcome for Dan and his sister and the Archers would be for Skaggs to sit down in a room with his kids and give them the answers to their questions.
Yeah.
But then you do take a step back, right? And you think, okay, so if they get the answers they're looking for, does that give them closure? Or does that just confirm the nightmares they currently have?
Yeah. I think it would just provide them more data to take inventory of what they're choosing to do with their lives. And I think they've both been forced to do that.
And we should add, too, that, from that first text, of Dan and I agreeing to meet in person, us flying out there, Leslie was on board. And then we get out there. So 4 weeks later, about a month later, we get out there and she canceled an hour before we showed up. So it makes you wonder, too, has Leslie come to terms and she doesn't want to reopen any doors. She didn't want to hear anything new.
Sure. Or, it goes back to where we're talking about how we all had to pay to play. We all had to, flying there, driving there, knocking on the door. It was nerve-wracking. There were a lot of unknowns. Even when we're driving up and Dan says, all right, I've got some big dogs. It's like, great, is this thing going to bite my leg off?
Yeah, what kind of dog was that?
Yeah, bull mastiff. It weighed the same as me.
Yeah. I just remember sitting at the dining room table in their kitchen eating dinner, and after dinner interviewing Dan, and the dog comes right up beside him. And this is a high top dining room table, like with bar stools. And the dog's head is right above the table. Like it didn't have to jump up. It could see everything on the table just fine.
I was eating at the table. He came and sat on my leg. I had my feet under the table and he came and just plopped. And I was like, I have a 200-pound sack of potatoes on my leg right now. So cute. So sweet.
What was his name?
Tank.
Tank. Was it Tank?
I think. I don't know.
I think it was Tank.
Yeah. Beautiful dog. But look, I think too, though, that tells you so many unknowns. I don't think Dan knew how to explain to Leslie what we were going to do. Had we said, hey, we're going to meet with you guys individually, met with Dan first, and then he told Leslie, hey, you got to meet with these guys. This is what happened. This is the information they brought. I think it would have been different. I do think Leslie thought it was going to be a negative experience. I thought it was
and Leslie just continues to remain as this.
She's an enigma on the outside. Yes. So overall, I loved that it carried the theme of chasing ghosts, right? It was just us sitting down with Dan's ghosts. It was being immersed in all of these different facts and details of a story that we have huge missing chunks for. But in the meantime, just existing with them and existing with the people that are in them and sharing positive elements of them. It was great to hear Dan say a lot of the things that he said. And so really appreciate him having the courage to face whatever it was that he was facing.
Well, and do you remember as he began sharing a little bit more with us, Kim came over and sat down next to him and started holding his hand or kind of tapping him. And it was interesting because I do think at that moment she even sensed that he was comfortable.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Maybe a little too comfortable. And she's like, hey, remember, don't, you know.
Yeah, we all went. There was a level of distress to, and then having also the discernment to say, can we not record this that I'm about to say right now? And all of us knowing without him saying that, like, hey, we're going to turn this off and let's move on to phase 2 of this thing. So I think I admire his willingness to face this. I can't even imagine. I can't even begin. And you think about what he's internalized from the knowledge that he's had about these incidents.
Oh, and what was it, the sentence that he shared with us in the very, very beginning when we asked him just to, say his name and who he is. And that was hard.
Yeah.
Because I've never looked at Dan that way before.
Yeah.
I don't think the audience would look at Dan that way, but that's how he's labeled himself.
Joan's case remains unsolved. If you have any information about this case, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Office. Coming up next time.
What am I going to say? By the way, I'm son of the devil.